Hello everyone and welcome to the lecture on AWS IAM Identity Center. So what is AWS IAM Identity Center? 1. Centralized Identity Management Service. AWS IAM Identity Center, formerly known as AWS SSO, Single Sign-On, offers a unified service to manage access to AWS services and applications. It simplifies the task of granting and revoking access to AWS resources for users. 2. Integrates with AWS and enterprise applications. It seamlessly integrates with AWS services, providing a single sign-on SSO experience across AWS and third-party enterprise applications. Third, supports SSO and fine-grained access control. IAM Identity Center supports single sign-on, allowing users to access multiple applications with a single set of credentials. It also offers fine-grained access control policies to manage users' permissions effectively. So basically, you have AWS Web Console. So if you implement SSO or IAM Identity Center, so from that point onwards, you can provide a single sign-on with other identity providers, not just AWS. So you can either log into their website first and redirect it to AWS, or the other way around also. Okay, AWS IAM Identity Center rename. So let's go over some terminology updates. Wherever we previously said AWS SSO user or SSO user, we now refer to that as workforce user or simply a user. Instead of saying AWS SSO user portal or user portal, we now refer it to as AWS access portal. Then AWS SSO integrated applications are now called AWS managed applications. So earlier it was called AWS SSO integrated application. Now we just call it AWS managed application. Earlier we used to refer to as AWS SSO directory. Now it's called Identity Center directory. So this is how you can integrate your directory or the third party directory where all the users reside, and you can choose whether it will be identity provider or the service provider. And lastly, we had what was once known as AWS SSO store or AWS SSO identity store. Now it's just referred as Identity Store in the IAM Identity Center. So it's just the rebranding of the same technology and different terms being introduced. So there's a rename. So when and where to use AWS IAM Identity Center? First, managing multiple AWS accounts. Use IAM Identity Center when managing user access across multiple AWS accounts, simplifying credential management and access control. Second, implementing SSO across AWS services. Ideal for organizations looking to implement single sign-on for a seamless user experience across AWS services and applications. 3. Enhancing security with centralized access control. Enhancing security by centralizing access control and permissions management, making it easier to comply with security policies and regulations. Key features, concepts and terminologies. 1. Single sign-on. SSO is a key feature that allows users to access multiple AWS services and applications with one set of credentials, enhancing user experience and security. Second, multi-factor authentication. IAM Identity Center supports MFA, adding an extra layer of security by requiring users to provide 2 or more verification factors to gain access. 3. Permission sets and policies. So this one defines access permissions through sets and policies. So it's called permission sets in IAM Identity Center, and this is to define access permissions through something called as sets and policies, which enables any administrators to grant fine-grained access to AWS resources based on user roles and responsibilities. Okay, managing user identities with IAM Identity Center. So first is manage user identities in IAM store. So IAM Identity Center provides an identity store for creating and managing user identities directly within its service. Connect to existing identity sources. So it allows for easy integration with external identity sources, including Microsoft Active Directory, Okta, Ping Identity, Jump Cloud, and Microsoft Entra ID, formerly known as Azure AD. So this is to facilitate user management. and select attributes for a attribute based access control. So users can select specific attributes such as cost center or title from their identity source to utilize in attribute based access control within AWS, enhancing security and access management. Okay, setting up IAM Identity Center. 1. Automatic default identity source configuration. When IAM Identity Center is enabled for the first time, it is set up with an Identity Center directory. So it's automatically set up first time with something called Identity Center directory as the default identity source. So we need a directory. Directory is used to create, for example, user IDs and passwords. And that is default identity source, simplifying the initial configuration process. Second, using IAM Identity Center directory. So the default setup uses the IAM Identity Center directory as the primary way to manage identities, offering a straightforward solution for user management. Third, integration with external identity providers for organizations already using other identity providers such as AWS S3 service or Microsoft Active Directory, Microsoft Entra ID or Okta. IAM Identity Center allows integration with these services, providing flexibility and extending existing identity management capabilities. Options for identity sources. This integration capability ensures that organizations can choose the most suitable identity source for their needs, whether sticking with the default IAM Identity Center directory or leveraging their existing identity provider infrastructure. So you can use, so basically to summarize, you can in AWS we have own IAM, but we are not using, you can use someone else if you have already set up this infrastructure. Okay, using Active Directories with IAM Identity Center. So this is because Active Directory is being used in corporates a lot. So that's why there's this specific slide for that. So 1, region specific identity center setup. IAM Identity Center must be enabled in the same AWS region as your AWS managed Microsoft AD directory, ensuring that assignment data is stored in the correct region. Active Directory in the management account. And an existing AD connector or AWS managed Microsoft AD directory within your AWS organization's management account is required to connect with IAM Identity Center. 3. Active Directory in the delegated admin account. For IAM Identity Center delegated administrators, using Active Directory as an identity source, an existing AD connector or AWS managed Microsoft AD in the delegated admin account is needed. 4th, changing IAM Identity Center identity source. To change the identity source to or from Active Directory, the directory must be owned by the IAM Identity Center delegated admin account or reside in the management account. Okay, common tasks in IAM Identity Center. First, create permission sets. 2, assign AWS account access for an IAM Identity Center user. 3, then you sign into AWS Access Portal with your IAM Identity Center credentials. 4th, assign AWS account access for groups. 5th, set up single sign-on access to your applications. And 6th, view user and group assignments. So these are like, as an admin, these are the most common tasks. Like we'll have like create permission sets, assign AWS account access for the IAM Identity Center user. Then the user probably log in. Then you can assign groups for managed applications. And then you can set up single sign-on for other applications as well. Okay, permission sets. So define permission sets with IAM policies. A permission set consolidates one or more IAM policies for organizational access management. Simplify AWS account access management. These sets streamline AWS account access for users and groups, enhancing permission management. For example, database admin permission set includes policies for AWS RDS, DynamoDB, and Aurora, simplifying access for database credentials, database administrators across AWS accounts. IAM Identity Center assign access via permission sets. Assigning a set automatically creates and associate roles and policies within AWS accounts. Creates IAM roles in AWS accounts. IAM Identity Center controlled roles are established to facilitate access. Policies attached to IAM roles. Defined policies are attached to roles. ensuring enforced access permissions. And IAM Identity Center manages roles and policies. Updates to permission sets trigger automatic updates to corresponding roles and policies. So just to make this bit clear, so I'll try to. So for example, we have something called as permission sets. Okay, and this permission sets gets mapped to what we call as roles and policies, right? So you create a permission set over here, and that's get mapped to the roles and policies, corresponding roles and policies. So when a user have an access to an AWS resource and resource or application, because these particular AWS resources can understand only roles and policies, so these permission sets based on what you have assigned in the Identity Center user gets translated to respective roles and policies, and that's how the user gets access to the AWS resource or the managed applications through the permission sets. But at this layer, what we are aware of or what we know of is permission sets. Okay, AWS IAM Identity Center integration with AWS organizations. So this is for AWS organizations. So when we have more than one account, we will use something like AWS organizations to better manage all our accounts. So you can have dev account, production account, region based account, department based account. So it will all fall under AWS organizations. Let's say a very big company which is globally spread across can have different accounts for different tailored purpose or for different purpose. So let's say how it integration IAM Identity Center integrates with AWS organization. So one, centralized permissions management across AWS accounts. AWS IAM Identity Center integration with AWS organization allows for the central management of permissions across multiple AWS accounts, eliminating the need for manual configuration of each account. Define and assign permissions to control access. Permissions can be defined and assigned to workforce users, granting them control access to specific AWS accounts. Third, management account creates the organization. The management account is the primary AWS account used to create and manage the organization within AWS organizations. So as I talked about, this is AWS organization is more than one account, but there should be a management account which will be controlling all the different the second, third, fourth account. And fourth, member accounts. So they belong to the organization. Member accounts are the additional AWS accounts that are part of the organization, managed under the centralized permission system of AWS IAM Identity Center. So in the management account, you have AWS IAM Identity Center permission sets and permissions, and through which it flows to the member accounts. Okay, application types. So there are few types. AWS managed applications. AWS managed applications are configured directly from within the relevant application consoles or through the application APIs. Then you have customer managed applications. Customer managed applications must be added to the IAM Identity Center console and configured with appropriate metadata for both IAM Identity Center and the service provider. Okay, now logging and monitoring in AWS IAM Identity Center. So first, AWS CloudTrail integration. AWS IAM Identity Center integrates with AWS CloudTrail to log API calls, which helps in security audits and operational troubleshooting. Third, Amazon CloudWatch event support. It also supports Amazon CloudWatch events for real-time monitoring, enabling automated responses to activities or changes within IAM Identity Center. And that's all. Thanks for watching.